Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. There was a thin silver necklace hanging obliquely on Anthony Rowland's thumb, shimmering with silver light. But what really stood out was the blue gem mounted on the necklace. The oval gemstone was about the size of a thumb and wrapped in silver wires like a petal, giving off an air of mystery and elegance under a sheet of silvery light. As soon as the silver necklace was taken out, the mage's eyes turned wide open, and even Jirian drew in a hissing cold breath. What a big piece of enigma sapphire! The hall was exceptionally quiet. All eyes fell onto the enigma sapphire. Even the attractive young woman who was contending with him couldn't stop amazement from showing in her beautiful eyes. This was definitely a treasure a mage would wish for. Storing mana was too important for a mage. Even an archmage would not be able to fill such a big enigma sapphire. A group of mages were whispering among themselves. It's worth at least 100,000 gold coins. Such a big piece, I reckon it's more than 100,000. The Rowland family has always been low profile, but they can actually bring out such good stuff like this. Looks like the water is not regular deep for the 11 mage families. But it's a little bit of a pity for such a big enigma sapphire to be set into the silver necklace. He should get a mithril necklace at the very least. It doesn't do any justice to the gem the way it is now. How much do you guys have? Why don't we gather our money and acquire the necklace for ourselves, then everyone can take turns using it. As soon as the guy finished speaking, he realized there was no sound around him. He looked around in puzzlement, only to see his colleagues who had been chatting amicably with him just a moment ago, all far away from him. The expressions of fear on their faces were as if they were afraid of getting infected by the plague. What's with the expressions? The group of mages really wanted to jump on him and strangle him to death. You actually dared to come up with such a thought in front of Jirian. How was it different from putting your hand into the president's pocket and taking money from it? Moreover, you had even mentioned everyone taking turns to use it. You'd be lucky if Jirian didn't find someone to tread you over. Come, everyone, gather our money. I think I have 30,000 here, how much do you all have? The group of mages tried desperately signal him with their winks, but the guy was utterly oblivious to it and still gathering money without knowing what death was like. Everyone seemed to see Jirian's frown. Under His Excellency's influence, the group of jerks couldn't care less about friendship and simply sold the clueless guy off. President, we swear we really don't know him. President? That slow-witted mage finally remembered whom he was sitting nearby. He felt cold sweat breaking out all over his body all at once, and tried to pull his face into a smile that was uglier than crying. Heh. Why are all of you so nervous? It was just a joke. Luckily for him, Jirian was too busy talking to Lin Li to notice his rebellious thoughts. What do you think of giving him 50,000 gold coins? 80,000, Lin Li did some calculations in his heart and decided to raise the price. I reckon that fellow only has 200,000 gold coins in his hands. If we give too little, I'm afraid he won't have a chance against the thief leader. I have to get this necklace. You're also interested in the enigma sapphire? Jirian was slightly taken aback. He knew the kid too well. He had always thought that even if all the mages in the world would need the enigma sapphire, this kid wouldn't have any use for it. The scene at the level certification hall had left too deep an impression on him. A magic output 28 minutes long was absolutely beyond the scope of a monster, and could only be described as a demon's. I'll let you have the stone, I only want the necklace. Lin Li's eyes were glued to the thin silver necklace. He was too familiar with the aura emitted from the necklace. He had once felt the same aura from the enchantment guru back in the endless world. If his guess was correct, the metal used for the necklace was definitely the deep silver. In the endless world, the deep silver could only be found by luck, but not by searching. In order to jolt his magical enchantment profession, Lin Li had used all his connections just to coat the gold rod with one layer of deep silver. But this stuff was just too rare, almost no one had seen it in the endless world. For that period of time, Lin Li spent his days squatting at the auction house. The Mercenary Guild's private commission was hung all year round, and the reward was increased by a small amount every day and then saw a huge increase every 3 days, but no one had ever brought the stuff out. Thinking it over, Lin Li felt that he was really pretty lucky. With his wealth and status in the endless world, he could do anything he wanted. But it was the Black Lotus and Deep Silver that he couldn't get even after trying everything possible. To think he had encountered them a month after having transmigrated. Lin Li was grinning from ear to ear, just thinking about the gold rod coated with deep silver. That was a genuine worldly weapon. In addition to strengthening the attributes of magical enchantment, it could also raise the enchantment success rate to a terrifying level. A 100% would be an exaggeration, but it could guarantee at least 90%. Just think about an enchantment guru with a 90% success rate, what a demonic thing it would be. "Will do as you wish," Jirian only nodded after hearing what Lin Li said and did not ask what was so extraordinary about the necklace. Then, the people in the hall saw Jirian, who was supposed to be the star of the auction, rising from a shabby spot in the audience. "From what I see, this Enigma sapphire is worth around 80,000 gold coins." "Thank you, President Jirian." When Anthony Rowland heard the figure, his suspended heart finally descended into place. He had a total of 200,000 on hand, adding the 80,000 gold coins. It would be enough to acquire the 3 bottles of arcane magic potion. Then, let the auction continue. Kevin's gavel landed on the table again. Madame Daphne had offered 200,000 gold coins. Anyone else with a higher bid than Madame Daphne? 250,000. With Jirian's promise in hand, Anthony Rowland raised the price to 250,000 without any hesitation. This astonishing figure immediately drew murmurs from the guild hall. 250,000 for 3 bottles of arcane magic potion, the average price had far exceeded the previous few bottles that were sold. To many, this was no longer an auction, but a fit of pique. 250,000 was indeed a ruthless bid. Even a wealthy thief leader like Daphne did not dare to follow through. After receiving the arcane magic potion from the guild's mage's hands, Anthony Rowland was so agitated that he held the 3 bottles tightly in his arms for a long time, reluctant to let go. With Kevin's gavel hammering down once again, the auction resumed. Just then, Jirian suddenly noticed his convenient nephew coming his way. "I'm so sorry, Uncle Jirian. I have some urgent matters on hand to deal with, and I'm afraid they can't wait until the auction is over." Castellan Isaac's face was regretful. Lin Li was waiting for someone to deliver the deep silver necklace to him when he heard Uncle Jirian all of a sudden and almost bit his tongue off out of shock. How could he not have seen before that Jirian had the talent of a social butterfly? Earlier on, he had said that he had no relations with the Castellan, but after turning a circle back, he had been upgraded to Uncle Jirian. Important things come first, go and do what you need to do. Uncle will not make you stay any longer. But if there's time in the future, you must come to the Guild of Magic to visit Uncle. Jirian's smile was gentle and amiable, just like an affable senior's. Sure. Castellan Isaac felt his temples throbbing again. He answered vaguely in a hurry and fled the Emerald Tower. After stepping out of the gates, Isaac took a deep breath of the fresh air outside and swore to himself that he'd never come to this darned place again if he didn't have to. Master Castellan, the 3 men walked out of the Emerald Tower, and the mage in black robe asked with some hesitation in a low voice, "We didn't find the person this time, will it be difficult to answer to Mr. Grimm?" "Mr. Grimm is magnanimous and won't haggle over such trifles with us. Besides, with Mr. Grimm's ability, how can he not find someone if he sets his mind to it?" Looks like we were too meddlesome this time. Since leaving the Emerald Tower, Isaac's expression was unusually relaxed. To him, no matter how bad things were, they couldn't be worse than facing Jirian, that old jerk. After finishing the previous sentence, the Castellan's brows were knitted again. He spoke to the mage in black robe in a low voice, "Andrew, if you have nothing much to do lately, you might want to pay more attention to the Guild of Magic. I'm actually also interested in the man Mr. Grimm is looking for." "Yes, Master Castellan." After watching the 3 men leave, Jirian's expression was somewhat odd. Laugh if you want, why try so hard to hold it in? Aren't you scared you'll suffer internal injuries from holding it in? Lin Li pouted and moved closer out of curiosity. Come, tell me what exactly happened. Why did the castellan address you as uncle? Could it be that you really know his father? That's of course. Jirian's face was boastful. The castellan said it personally. His father saw me 20 years ago, apparently he instructed me. Damn it, so many mages instructed me 20 years ago, how would I know which one was his father? So, you became his uncle? Lin Li's eyes were glazed and expression dazed. He took a look at Jirian in front of him and thought of the castellan's age. He looked up to the heavens and sighed heavily. This shameless old man. You can't blame me. He was the one who wanted to pull strings. Since he wants it, then I'll give him the chance. Besides, he's so enthusiastic. If I don't become his uncle, he might be very disappointed. Lin Li felt a heartfelt admiration at his words. You are a genius. As the old and the young were whispering away, another deal was completed in the hall. This time, it was still the beautiful young woman and a mage family who competed, only this time, the beautiful young woman's rival was not the Roland family, but the Kareka family. The result was still the same. When the price was raised to 230,000, the beautiful thief leader was defeated again. Lin Li took a glance at Daphne and concluded in a low voice, she has no chance anymore. Jirian was stunned for a moment, and asked surprised, how do you know? Didn't you realize? Both times when the price was at tens of thousands, she would raise it to 200,000 all of a sudden. She should be trying to scare off the opponent, but to little avail. If my guess is correct, she only has exactly 200,000 gold coins with her. If I can see this, the other mage families can see it as well. Just look, if she participates in the next contest again, someone would surely second kill her with a direct 200,000. Lin Li was indeed correct. When the second round of auction began, Daphne was once again the first person to offer a bid. 100,000. 210,000. Contending with her was the Merlin family. It was the mage in red robe whom Jirian described as Hussy, the third son of the Merlin family. He quoted the startling price without so much as wrinkling his brows. So, the hall fell into dead silence. Although Daphne's expression was awful, she did not offer a higher price. Not to mention Jirian, even the mages who were sitting at the side understood that the thief leader, indeed, could not take out more money. Damn. Jirian blurted out a swear. This kid was too accurate. 210,000 going once. 210,000 going twice. 210,000 going thrice. The gavel in Kevin's hand dropped heavily on the table. Deal. Congratulations, Mr. Evan. This was probably the weirdest auction of the day, with only a total of 2 bids from the start. The increment was unprecedentedly big, it was 50,000 higher than the starting bid, and a 110,000 increment at once. However, after a brief silence, Kevin pushed the auction to a climax with a message. In order to get enough arcane magic potion for everyone to buy, the guild has decided to take out another 3 bottles of arcane magic potion for everyone to bid on. And the next auction will be a one-shot sale of 10 bottles. No one had expected the Guild of Magic to be this bold, going from 3 bottles to 10 bottles at once. Even with the additional 3 bottles, there would only be 2 opportunities for them to contend. You taught him? Lin Li glanced at Jirian strangely. When did the old man learn to be so clever, knowing to play the game of killing 3 warriors with 2 peaches? Heh heh. I used telepathy to inform him just now. Jirian laughed in a gratified manner. 3 big families, but only 2 chances. I'll see how they're going to compete. Brilliant. Jirian had indeed executed a brilliant maneuver this time. Among the 3 major mage families in Gerosis, except for the Merlin family that had taken a whirl earlier on, the Mans family and the Saruman family had not even made a move. The reason for their inaction was not hard to imagine. As one of Gerosis' 3 major mage families, they knew each other through and shared an unspoken understanding. The three families knew how many bottles each should take, and no one would undermine this tacit understanding. Too bad Jirian would not give them the opportunity. You like to play modestly? Then I'd simply give you a push. The Merlin family had taken 3 bottles just now and would surely not be satisfied. Everyone knew they had the most level 4 apprentices. The other 2 families had not taken any bottle and would be even less likely to give up. This was the arcane magic potion. If the opportunity was missed, who knew when the next one would come? This time it would be impossible for the 3 families not to fight at close range, even if that was not what they wished for. There seemed to be a hint of smoke in the quiet hall. The 3 families were sitting at the first row, not far away from one another. They had occasionally exchanged a few words at the start of the auction. But as the alarming news came out, each of the 3 parties seemed to have erected an invisible wall around them. No one was in the mood for talks anymore. Their eyes fell on Kevin, waiting for the small wooden gavel to drop. The atmosphere in the hall became a little stifling at once, like the panic-stricken feeling one would get before the storm struck. By this point in time, the 6 underground forces and the 8 mage families had lost all their chances to contend in the auction. Their wealth and power were a far cry from the 3 big mage families. In fact, even if they had had the chance, they would not have dared to step forward. In the entire Gerosa city, who would dare to challenge the 3 giants head-on, besides the Guild of Magic? The quiet guild hall was meant to be the stage for the 3 big families. But they were still feeling nervous. The auction of the arcane magic potion would likely change the currents in Gerosa city. Even a small detail might decide the life and death of thousands of people. See, the guy in front wearing a black mage robe and covering his head with a hood is the patriarch of the Saruman family, Ruben Saruman. The only people who were not tense would probably be the old and young hiding in the back. Jirian looked relaxed, stretching his chubby fingers out toward the front row and patiently introducing VIPs to Lin Li. Lin Li took a glance from a distance and found the aura coming out from the leader of the Saruman family a little peculiar. It was pure feeling, not about strength nor magical wave. It was just sheer sense that this person was weird, as if he was dead, and however you looked at it, it'd always give you an uncomfortable feeling. You felt it too? Jirian chuckled as he saw the bewildered look on Lin Li's face. Strictly speaking, this fellow is not really a real mage. He's actually a conjurer. Conjurer? Lin Li was startled by that word, and thought of McGren and his daughter. You mean, he's skilled in curse spells? That's right. Isn't it weird, the leader of a mage family is in fact a conjurer. You have insider information? Lin Li knew the old man had to have some insider information, judging from the look on his face. Actually, it's not really an insider information, almost half of Gerosa city knows about it. There was some fear in Jirian's voice. In Gerosa city, other than that old bastard Matthew, Ruben is the one I fear the most. This fellow didn't have any magical talent when he was young. He was still a level 4 apprentice at 20. At that time, not to mention us, even his father had given up on him. Not long after his 25th birthday, old Saruman announced his successor, Ruben's half-brother, Sosa. On the day old Saruman announced the news, Ruben disappeared from Gerosa city. His disappearance lasted for 5 years. No one knew where he went, and no one knew what he did in that 5 years. He did not return to Gerosis until he was 30. At this point, Jirian paused slightly before he continued. After he returned, the first thing he did was killing. From his half-brother to his father, those who were qualified for the position of the patriarch were killed off by him in a night. After that, Ruben had the whole family tightly controlled in his hands, with his iron fist. In the subsequent 30 years, he had even brought the then small Saruman family to become one of the 3 biggest families in Gerosis today. Ruthless. This was Lin Li's only comment on Ruben Saruman. This guy is a lunatic. Jirian shook his head. There was a sense of frustration in his tone as he said, although Matthew is formidable, at least he has a weakness we can grasp. For example, his brothers and son. But this lunatic from the Sarumans, there's really nothing I can do with him, unless you have an absolute power that can kill him with a flip of your hands. But this lunatic knows how to endure, and he will not provoke an invincible enemy unless he is absolutely confident. Lin Li did not pay much attention to Jirian's final comment, for he had another thing on his mind. Did the curse on McGran have something to do with the Saruman family? But after much deliberation, Lin Li could not figure out any possible reason behind it. McGran and his daughter were merely ordinary adventurers, their strength was only at a level 5 or 6, wealth and power were far from the answer as well. With Ruben Saruman's status, there was no reason he'd want anything from them. While Lin Li was racking his brains, Kevin announced the climax of the auction. 10 bottles of arcane magic potion, starting bid 100,000 gold coins. Let the bidding start. 110,000 gold coins. Right. Felik, you must know this person. The richest man in the whole Gerosa city all the way till Felon Kingdom, the patriarch of the Man's family, Isra Mans. The Man's family? On hearing the name, Lin Li couldn't help but think of the gilded rose that had bloomed over Gerosis. If he hadn't seen the staff selling for thousands of gold coins in the gilded rose, he would not have thought of concocting potions to make money. But the funny thing was that after circling around, that money would be made on gilded rose. Lin Li looked up and cast a glance, only to find that the owner of the gilded rose seemed a little too young. He looked to be in his 20s and not quite 30. He was handsome, fair, and refined, exuding a scholarly aura that would leave a good impression on people. Why is he so young? Lin Li was rather surprised, and even slightly stunned for a moment. What can he do? His father died too early, and he didn't have many sons. He's not older than Kevin, right? 2 years younger than Kevin, but he's much more promising than him. The boy was only 20 when he took over the Man's family. At the time, us old fellows thought that the Man's family would be weakened this time. But who knew that, for all these years, not only did the Man's family not decline, it was more prosperous than in his father's hands. As Jirian spoke, he shot a discontented glare at Lin Li. It makes me angry, just thinking about it. Damn it, what kind of world are we living in? Why is Gerosis full of this kind of demons? A few years ago, it was Isra, and now there's you, a little bastard even more demonic. Lin Li scratched his head, wondering whom he had offended. Speaking of which, it's odd. The boy has been in charge of the Man's family for 7 years, but has not fought even once. No one knows what his actual strength is. You know old Odin. A few years ago, due to some business strife, the old fellow sent a few assassins to sound him out. In the end, none of the people he sent returned, and a few days later, his beard was shaved while he was asleep. The old fellow woke up in the middle of the night and was scared silly on the spot. He ran over to the man's house overnight, begging for mercy, and apologized for what he did. Only then was the matter finally settled. While the two men were talking, the price for the 10 bottles of arcane magic potion was raised to 400,000. 450,000. Ruben Saruman always seemed to have a gloomy chill around him. Every time Lin Li heard him bid, he'd feel a chill creeping over his body. 480,000. Isra's smile was gentle like a breath of fresh air, but his bid was firm and quick. He raised the price by 30,000 almost as soon as Ruben's voice fell. Ruben Saruman was also a ruthless character. If not, he wouldn't have killed his father and brother in one night. An emaciated arm was raised from under the black mage robe. 550,000. This astonishing price was not enough to scare off the wealthiest man of Gerosis. The emaciated arm was barely down when Isra Mans raised the price by another 30,000 yet again. 580,000, 650,000. Damn. The people in the guild's hall went completely mad as soon as the new price was out. The group of mages looked at each other and wondered if they had misheard. Lin Li drew in a cold breath and pinched his thighs forcefully. Even Jirian, who was sitting beside him, couldn't help clutching the armrest of the chair and yammered under his breath, "Too exciting, too exciting. Mr. Kevin, please hold for a moment." Isra Mans did not continue his bid, but requested for a break instead. I remembered President Jirian said that if we're tight on cash, we could use items to replace it. Is that right, Mr. Kevin? The hall fell silent all of a sudden, and all eyes were on Man's. This sentence was much more shocking than the Saruman family's bid. No one had thought that the second one who admitted that he did not have enough cash apart from Anthony Roland would be Man's, the wealthiest man in Jerosa City. You are right, Chief Izura. Then, I would like President Jirian to evaluate how much this set of mage equipment is worth. The young patriarch gave a quick order and his attendants quickly brought in a set of equipment. There were 3 pieces in this set, a staff inlaid with a level 8 magical crystal, a black rune mage robe, and a mithril necklace hung with a singing crystal. Jirian stared at the set of equipment without saying a word, but in his heart, he was berating him. Damn you, pretty boy, are you trying to make fun of me? The stuff was good. All 3 pieces of equipment were excellent products, particularly the mithril necklace. Normal mages would be envious should they even get a look at it. However, it was the auction for arcane magic potion now. Such an underachieving set of equipment would only reap in 20,000 gold coins from the Gilded Rose at most. In a business involving thousands of hundreds gold coins, these 20 or 30,000 gold coins would not even create bubbles, much less if he wanted to pay with it. More like paying with life. Everyone was in their own state of mind when the young rich man spoke again. To be frank, President Jirian, the man's family is tight on cash recently. The smile on the young patriarch's fair face was gentle as always, but the words spoken next sent the Saruman family into complete despair. Therefore, we would like to use 100 sets like this to exchange for 10 bottles of arcane magic potion. What do you say, President Jirian? 100 sets? Jirian swallowed his saliva with great difficulty. Yes, 100 sets. Deal. The hall was frighteningly quiet. This had to be the most absurd scene of the auction. The whole deal was not even validated by Kevin's gavel, but not one present doubted the validity of it. What struck them as absurd was the man's family using 100 set of excellent equipment just to exchange for 10 bottles of arcane magic potion. They had even wondered if the young patriarch had gone mad. And with the absurdity came the unprecedented sense of crisis. The Guild of Magic today could be described as the sun at high noon. They had one of the most powerful mages in Jerosa City and a real pharmacist. On top of this terrifying power, the man's family gifted them 100 sets of powerful magic equipment. The leaders of several forces felt their heads numb just thinking about it. What a horrifying force would it be with 100 well-equipped mages? Moreover, the leaders of these forces were not fools. After the initial sense of absurdity had passed, they quickly came to realize that the man's family would not be doing a losing business for no reason. After taking out the 100 sets of excellent equipment, they would surely form a series of collaborations with the Guild of Magic. Everyone had the same idea in mind as they thought of the collaboration of these two giants. There was going to be a change of weather in Jerosa City. It was the richest man in Jerosa City on one side, and the most powerful mage in Jerosa City on the other. Before the faces that carried a variety of expressions, 2 hands were clasped tightly together. President Jirian, I have a small request, the young patriarch spoke in a soft voice as he held Jirian's hand. I wonder if you can introduce me to the young pharmacist in your guild. This is perhaps the only thing I can't decide. I'll have to ask him before I can make a decision. Jirian's expression was helpless. Indeed, he couldn't call the shots in this matter. Lin Li could be said to be the most unique member in the Guild of Magic. No one could force him to do the things he didn't want to, including Jirian. Everyone knew that without this young mage, there would be no future for the guild. Then that's too bad, Izura was regretful, but quickly regained his smile. Then, could I trouble you to tell the pharmacist that I happen to have a big deal on hand and am in need of 3 magica potions? If he's willing to help, the reward will be absolutely satisfactory for him. He can choose any 3 items from the collection of the man's family. Jirian gasped in surprise. The man's family was the richest in all of Felon Kingdom. Who knew how much good stuff they had hidden in the 1,300 years after the Dark Ages? Jirian had never once imagined such thing as getting to choose any 3 items. Not long after the richest man in Jerosis left, Jirian came over with a creepy look on his face. That kid wants to discuss a business deal with you, are you interested? Lin Li knew the old fellow had to have gotten something good judging by the look on his face. What business deal? Tell me. 3 bottles of magica potion. As for the rewards, Jirian raised up 3 fingers and his expression was slightly exaggerated. You get to choose any 3 items from the man's family's equipment bank. Not interested. Lin Li replied without even thinking about it. F***ck. Jirian felt his legs turn weak, and his old illness almost relapsed from the scare. The old man barely managed to steady himself by holding on to the chair and didn't even have the time to straighten his tilted hat. Utterly discomfited, he roared, "You're not interested?" Faced with the president's sudden rage, the group of mages were scared silly at once. They looked at Jirian with trepidation and desperately shrank back for fear that the old fellow might spill blood on them. For the moment, there was a big space around Lin Li, and he sat there by himself as if nothing had happened and still had the time to stretch out his hand and point to Jirian's head, kindly reminding him of his image. "Your hat is tilted." Oh, Jirian was taken by surprise at his words and quickly straightened his mage hat. But halfway through, he remembered the reason for his anger. Damn it, don't change the topic. I'm asking you a question, are you sick? The man's family's hoard is something that many people could not dream about. You get to choose any 3 items from them and you're still not interested? Are you trying to piss me off, you little bastard? Sit down first, I'll explain to you slowly. Lin Li pulled Jirian back to his seat and continued, "Say, you're an old man, how could you still have such a big temper? It'll hurt your health if you get too agitated easily. To tell you the truth, it doesn't pay for this business." How does it not pay? As soon as Jirian heard the word business, all his anger was gone. In particular, he was dumbfounded when he heard that it would not pay, and looked at Lin Li with confusion on his face. The magica potion is not that easy to concoct as you think it may be. Jirian got anxious at his words. Even you're unable to concoct it? Not that it can't be concocted, it's just that the ingredients are not easy to get. Lin Li shook his head and held out his hand, counting each and every one out for Jirian. The essence of 2 elements, fire and water, the blood of a high-level demon, magical crystal above level 15. Can you get all these items? I have a level 15 magical crystal, as for the others. So, don't think about it, Lin Li concluded with the sentence. Actually, there was another reason that he did not reveal, mainly because he was worried it might frighten Jirian. The old man was 60-something this year, and if anything happened to him, it would lay heavy on Lin Li's conscience. The man's family was indeed the richest in Gerosis. Lin Li had no doubt they had an abundant collection in the family. But choosing 3 pieces of equipment had no meaning for Lin Li. He was a guru well-versed in 5 series, as long as the ingredients on hand were enough. Was there any equipment he couldn't get? Jirian pondered over it and was unwilling to give up. If not, I'll go ask Izura again to see if he has enough ingredients. Then you go and find out first. Lin Li was not really interested in this deal, but Jirian was so enthusiastic it didn't seem nice to cast a damp over it. At this time, he was actually more concerned about the auction going on in the hall. There were only 10 arcane magic potion bottles left now, but out of the 3 families, 2 still had their eyes on them. Particularly the Saruman family, which hadn't gotten a single bottle yet. Now, the 3 bottles had completely driven them to the edge of the cliff. It was just as what old Merlin had said before, 30 level 5 mages coming into their own hands would be an icing on the cake, but if it fell into the hands of a rival, it would definitely be a deadly threat. 500,000. So, Kevin's gavel had just come down when Ruben Saruman announced a startling figure. Lin Li and Jirian looked at each other. The auction had far exceeded their estimates, hundreds of thousands of gold coins and 100 sets of excellent magic equipment. If the last 10 bottles were sold for a sky-high price, the 2 men would probably be reduced to the point of smashing people with money. Both their eyes were glowing, but little Merlin Evan was utterly regretful. If he'd known that things were going to get this far, he would have made his move sooner. 9 bottles were sold off consecutively earlier on, and if he had gotten them, he wouldn't have been forced to fight at such a close range with the Saruman family. Reuben Saruman was a lunatic, and a lunatic would not reason with you. Just look, this bastard had offered the princely sum of 500,000 at the beginning. Was he going to leave a damn way for others? Little Merlin felt his scalp bursting at that price, but he had no choice except to shore up his offer. Before he left the house, Matthew had instructed him to at least get 10 bottles of arcane magic potion back. There was only a pitiful 3 bottles with him now, not even half of 10 bottles. 550,000. Little Merlin said with utmost resolution, going completely head-on with Reuben Saruman. But what kind of a character was Reuben Saruman? He was someone who said he'd kill his father and brother and really did it without even batting his eyelids. He raised the price by another 100,000 once more. 650,000. Little Merlin felt his heart bleeding. He only had 800,000 gold coins with him. If he went with that lunatic Reuben's increment speed, it would only take 2 rounds for him to be kicked out of the contest for the arcane magic potion. 700,000. Little Merlin felt his liver churn when he shouted the price out. 800,000. As soon as Reuben Saruman uttered the price, everyone present fully believed the fellow to be a lunatic. 800,000 gold coins were thrown out without even a wrinkling of his brows. This was an absolute sky-high price, so what if this was the arcane magic potion? With this 800,000 gold coins, you could get 10 level 5 mages with just a throw of the money. Little Merlin could see nothing but blackness, and blood was almost spat out from his mouth. This fellow was really a lunatic. He didn't even have the strength to speak, he barely managed to lift his arm, and with the idea of leaving things to luck at last, he quoted a price with much difficulty, 820,000, you win. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. No one had expected Reuben Saruman to let go at this time. Sitting in the hall were leaders of the city's forces. How could they not see that Little Merlin was already a spent bullet? From the previous unstoppable momentum of a 100,000 increment to the last dying struggle of a 20,000 increment, everyone knew that this was all the cash the Merlin family could offer. At this time, even an addition of 10,000 would be enough to completely crush the Merlin family, but Reuben Saruman did not do that. He watched Kevin's gavel fall and let the stunned Little Merlin bring home the last 10 bottles of arcane magic potion. Deal. Congratulations, Mr. Evan. Until Kevin announced that it was a done deal, Little Merlin still stood there, dumbfounded. The feeling was too complicated. It was like a battle between 2 archmages. One saw that his mana was exhausted and struggled to unleash an icicle at the last moment, but as a result, the icicle stabbed the opponent right in the heart. It was as if having survived a disaster, and Little Merlin was immersed in it for a long while. Little Merlin did not realize what was wrong as Reuben Saruman turned around to leave. When Reuben Saruman passed by the last row, he dropped a word to Jirian without a look back. You owe me a favor. On hearing these words, the old and the young sitting at the last row couldn't help but laugh. This fellow, who did not even recognize his own kin, was indeed good at forbearing, just like Jirian said. In the face of the Guild of Magic that was at its height of influence, he had wisely chosen to take the initiative to befriend them, and the way he demonstrated his friendly intentions was simple and straightforward. For this auction, the greatest benefit was undoubtedly to maximize the value of arcane magic potion, forcing out the bottom line of the Merlin family with an astounding price. This alone was enough for the Guild of Magic to owe him a debt of gratitude. But on further thought, this was like a magic show. It looked like dancing on a tightrope, but in actual fact, it didn't involve much risk. He had created an aggressive momentum at the beginning, and at the end, he crazily got to an increment of 100,000, forcing the breath out of Little Merlin. But he was desperately calculating all along, figuring what was the exact bottom line for Little Merlin. Finally, he succeeded in pushing Little Merlin to stake all he had with a bid of 800,000. Little Merlin had won the arcane magic potion at last, but Reuben Saruman had won the favor of the Guild of Magic. And the risk he had undertaken was not that high as he had imagined. Even if he had miscalculated, he'd only have had to buy 10 bottles of arcane magic potion with 800,000 gold coins. It might be a little expensive, but he could still win the favor of the Guild of Magic nonetheless. The most foolish person would not reject a generous buyer, much less a shrewd person like Jirian. The Merlin family could only envy. Since the battle between old Merlin and Jirian, there was no possibility of any partnership between the Guild of Magic and the Merlin family. But it was still possible for the Saruman family and the Mans family. The patriarch of the second family had chosen to take the wise path, though he had taken a slightly different approach. Regardless, the Guild of Magic indeed owed the Saruman family a favor. Though upon careful thought, it would seem that this favor was a rather cheap one. The auction finally came to an end. The old and the young had brought out 33 bottles of arcane magic potion and harvested over 1,000,000 gold coins, 100 sets of excellent magic equipment, and a Guild of Magic at the peak of its power. After this auction, everyone was clear that the Guild of Magic would be the single most powerful force in Gerosis. Regardless of the 11 mage families or the 6 underground forces, no power would be able to contend with the Guild of Magic. The leaders of the forces sat in the guild hall, with different expressions on their faces, but the same thought in their minds. Some of the clever ones were already planning in their heads how to hold on to the Guild of Magic. Even the slightly slow-witted ones were reminding themselves to control their men when they got back. They were not to approach and provoke any guys in Gerosis City who were wearing long robes. The follow-up work could not be sloppy for such a grand auction like this. The leaders of the major forces who had attended the auction had to be served well. The gold coins they sent would need someone to count, of course. Meanwhile, the 100 sets of excellent magic equipment sent by the Mans family should be open to the guild mages to apply for. All the matters were in a mess, and just thinking about them would make anyone's head ache. However, the old and the young took their hands off all of it and dumped the matters to Kevin. They openly hid in the reception room on the grounds of having something important to discuss. The important thing they meant was to divide the spoils. To these jerks, the dividing process was undoubtedly filled with joy and pleasure. 1,540,000 gold coins were divided into 2 shares. The Guild of Magic would take 300,000 and the remaining 1,240,000 would all go to Lin Li. After all, for this auction, the herbs and work were all provided by Lin Li alone. The Guild of Magic had merely lent in the space, so it would be perfectly justified to give him the bigger portion of the pie. Moreover, there was the 100 sets of excellent magic equipment. This is your crystal card, that 1,240,000 is in it. You must keep it well. It'll be big trouble if you lose it. Jirian tossed him a translucent crystal chip with a few small letters etched on it with star sand. Lin Li took a look and realized it was the name he used in Amril. How do I use this stuff? Lin Li was a little perplexed. He knew that the crystal had a memory function and was often used for recording after being processed by magical means such as magic spells and sound image. But, he was puzzled by a thin crystal card like this. I really don't know how Anduin has taught you. Jirian was full of disdain. Glittergold's crystal card can be used anywhere in Amril. There's a glittergold bank in every city in general. If you need money, you can withdraw it directly. Surely you wouldn't want to carry the gold coins around? That's over 1,000,000 we're talking about. If melted into a golden ball, it'd be as tall as a house. Can you even carry it? Oh, Lin Li carefully put away the crystal card and took out the deep silver necklace from his pocket. The Enigma sapphire is yours, the necklace is mine. With a slight use of strength, Lin Li pulled out the Enigma sapphire from the necklace. He tossed it to Jirian without even taking a look at it. Although storing mana was a powerful ability, to Lin Li, it was not really of much use. If his almost infinite mana was exhausted, one more piece of Enigma sapphire would probably make no difference. Jirian received the gemstone cheerfully and then leaned in for another look. He asked, curiously, what exactly is this necklace? Deep silver, something you don't understand. After coming out from the reception room, Lin Li dived into the guild's alchemy lab before he could catch a breath. He couldn't wait any longer now that he had the deep silver in his hands. He really wanted to know the kind of magical power a gold bar, coated with deep silver would possess. All the mages were gathered in the guild hall for the auction. When Lin Li entered the alchemy lab, it was quiet, with no one in sight. Feeling assured, he opened up the ring of endless storm. Looking at the dazzling array of metal ingots, even Lin Li himself had to admit that he was some kind of freak of collectormania. From the cheapest copper and iron ingots to the expensive adamantine and mithril ingots, and then to all kinds of magical metals that were rarely seen in everyday life, there were actually dozens of kinds when counted together. What Lin Li had to do now was to select the materials for the gold rod from the dozens of metals. The gold rod was different from weapons and equipment. It wasn't that the higher the grade of metal, the more powerful it would be. This was more like a trade-off. Using ordinary metals would bring a higher level of stability for magical enchantment and greatly reduce the possibility of enchantment failure, while using magical metals as material would bring stronger enchantment effect. Different magical metals would also result in different enchantment effect. For a high-level magical enchanter, stability would always be the first priority. No matter how powerful the enchantment effect was, if it was not supported by stability, it would only be a joke in the end. Hence, almost all successful magical enchanters would choose the eternal adamantine to forge the gold rod. The eternal adamantine was known as the most stable of all metals in the world. A gold rod forged from it could also increase the success rate of enchantment by at least 10%. Lin Li had always been cautious. When he had begun to jolt his magical enchantment profession, the use of eternal adamantine had always been his aim. He had even prepared several pieces of eternal adamantine in advance for this purpose. He had never imagined that he could get the deep silver one day. Now that Lin Li had the deep silver in his hands, the metals that he could choose were just too many. The stability of gold rods, coated with deep silver, already reached an appalling level. What he had to consider now was how to maximize the enchantment effect brought on by magical metals. In front of Lin Li were three magical metals: dream iron, abyss mithril, and runes adamantine. He had chosen them from the array of metals. Although there were many other magical metals, they were inadequate in various ways and did not fit Lin Li's requirements for the gold rod. Only these three magical metals would task Lin Li's mind. Forging the gold rod with dream iron might bring magical dispelling effects to the equipment. Forging the gold rod with runes adamantine would greatly enhance the element attributes. Forging the gold rod with the abyss mithril would allow the equipment to possess a higher resistance to magic. All three were rare magical metals, and getting even one of them would be enough to keep a mage awake at night. Perhaps only a beast like Lin Li could take out all three at once, and this led him to face a blissful problem. All three magical metals were so excellent, but only one could be coated with the deep silver he had on hand. This was indeed a big dilemma for Lin Li. After spending an hour in the alchemy lab, he finally came to a decision with clenched teeth. The effect of strengthening element attributes was too singular, and the magic dispelling effect could only activate with a certain probability. After weighing the gains and losses, Lin Li chose the abyss mithril at last. Compared with strengthening element attributes, the application scope of magical resistance was much wider and could work every time, unlike the magic dispelling effect, which could only depend on luck. After deciding on the material for the gold rod, there was nothing else to worry about. When he was trying to jolt the magical enchantment profession, he washed away countless amounts of gold rods. To do such a thing now was as facile as driving along a familiar road in a light carriage. There was a small melting furnace in the alchemy lab which was usually used to smelt alchemy materials such as star sand and navy sand. The temperature was a little low, but it was not a problem for Lin Li. At the end of the recitation of a spell, the flaming hands was unleashed. The near-infinite mana fueled it wildly, and the scorching flame clung to the bottom of the furnace. It took only a moment before the abyss mithril began to show signs of melting. Lin Li used an iron clamp to pick the red abyss mithril up and, with the other hand, took out a hammer from the ring of endless storm. Sparks flew on the forging platform, the dazzling magical runes swung back and forth, magnificent like fireworks in the night sky. Under Lin Li's consummate skills, the gold rod forged with the abyss mithril began to take its form on the forging platform. A blacksmith guru was totally a demonic existence. In the blink of an eye, a gold rod was almost completed. The whole process was incredibly fast. There were still sparks dancing on the forging platform by the time Lin Li put the hammer down. Then, he waited for it to cool. Unlike ordinary metals, magical metals could not be actively cooled down, otherwise, it would cause a huge loss of magical properties in the metal. What Lin Li could do was only to wait patiently. While he was waiting, he put his hand into the ring of endless storm once more. This time, he took out a magical crystal, the size of a longan. The relationship between the gold rod and the magical enchanter was held together by the final touch of mental strength. The enchanter could not provide mana for the gold rod, so a magical crystal that was strong enough had to be embedded on it. Lin Li had chosen a level 15 magical crystal of a void walker. It was the strongest magical crystal he could take out at present. Although his hunter form had killed countless back then, he hadn't had the time to transfer most of the magical crystals to the smurf account. It had always been on Lin Li's mind ever since. Of course, what really strangled Lin Li was the dragon of destruction, Azardas. After the death of this legendary dragon, Lin Li could not find its magical crystal anywhere. The only thing that looked like a magical crystal was a stone found somewhere around its heart. But it was dull, thick, and rough. It didn't possess even the faintest magical wave. How could it be the source of mana for the legendary dragon? In the end, Lin Li could only dismember its body in anger. After a round of sick ravage, the famous dragon of destruction was skinned to the bones and all its remains thrown into the ring of endless storm. But this was not important. The magical crystal was just to provide the gold rod with mana. If he could kill an even more powerful magical beast in the future, he could always replace the level 15 magical crystal. After putting down the level 15 magical crystal, Lin Li took out another 2 gemstones, a ruby and an emerald. This was the core essence of the gold rod. The ruby and the emerald were collected from the nest of the dragon of destruction. After killing Azardas, the mountain of treasures there had left a deep impression on Lin Li. These 2 gemstones were embellished on top of the pile of treasure, like cherries on a birthday cake. Lin Li had yet to find out the origins of these 2 gemstones. He only knew that they looked brighter and purer than ordinary gemstones, and this was the kind of quality the gold rod needed. The purer and brighter the gemstones, the better it would be for decomposition and fusion. The ruby was used for decomposition, the emerald for fusion. The gold rod had gradually cooled down and was lying quietly on the forging platform, exuding the unique aura of an abyss mithril. It was a dark and abysmal feeling, just like a bottomless pool. Lin Li picked up the cooled gold rod. With a slight exertion of strength in his hands, he set the magical crystal onto the tip of the gold rod, followed by the ruby and emerald which were set at either side of the rod. After Lin Li was done, he opened up the ring of endless storm once again. This time, he took out a small bag of star sand. Lin Li looked around the alchemy lab, but couldn't find the amethyst vessel. He couldn't resist cursing the poor, wretched guild of magic. Finally, he thought it over and pulled out a glass beaker from his pocket instead. With one hand grasping the opening of the pouch, Lin Li shook it carefully, letting a little star sand into the beaker. An azure blue halo appeared in the beaker with that little bit of star sand. Through the refraction of the beaker, it looked as gentle as if in a dream. But Lin Li did not dare to get immersed in it. The star sand had to be held in amethyst, otherwise, the mana contained in it would disappear. He was forced, having no other way, but to use a glass beaker for the time being. Once the star sand was poured into the beaker, Lin Li speedily took out a bottle from the ring of endless storm. As soon as the bottle stopper was pulled out, a thick scent of blood filled the alchemy lab. It was the blood of the dragon of destruction, the most important ingredient for the dragon's blood ink. Half a vial of the dragon's blood was poured into the beaker. It instantly merged with the star sand. If looked at from up close, one could even see thin blue threads swimming in between the crimson. Another spell recitation for the flaming hand sounded. Lin Li carefully controlled the mana, letting the flickering flame stroke the bottom of the beaker gently. The dragon's blood began to boil, and a peculiar smell permeated the air. It was the smell of heated and evaporated blood mixed with the freshness of the star sand, a smell that was strange and pungent. Threads of blue were slowly dissolving in the boiling blood. This was a remarkably slow process. The dissolution of each blue thread seemed to darken the dragon's blood by a fraction. By the time the last strand of blue thread disappeared, a deep blue hue was faintly glowing in the crimson liquid. Lin Li stopped the output of his mana and placed the completed dragon's blood ink at a side. Then, he opened up the ring of endless storm again. This time, he took out a crystal pen carved from crystal. The center of the crystal pen was hollow and the tip was covered with fine lines. Lin Li dipped it into the star ink. The thick dragon's blood ink flowed along the lines from the tip of the pen and quickly filled the pen as its lead. Lin Li picked up the gold rod at hand. The crystal pen dipped in the dragon's blood ink leaped swiftly, sketching lines on the gold rod. Since seeing the deep silver, these lines had been played back in Lin Li's mind hundreds and thousands of times. Every line and stroke had been conceived countless times. There was no need to hesitate where to set the magic nodes and where to construct the magic circuits. With merely a gentle brush of the nib, the lines were there, as if undesigned. If the owner of the ManhwaRecap in the level certification was present, he would have to praise Lin Li once he saw how impressive the latter had been. The construction of 2 high-level ManhwaRecaps at the same time had completely transcended the scope of inscriptions. Moreover, the 2 ManhwaRecaps were mutually opposed and mutually exclusive. However, Lin Li was swiftly penning away at that moment. In the blink of an eye, the 2 ManhwaRecaps had taken shape. The 2 magic circuits led to the end of the magic crystal, from which magic was continuously absorbed. 26 magic nodes encircled the ruby and the emerald like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon. The power of the 2 ManhwaRecaps was thoroughly activated through the ruby and the emerald. Lin Li drew the last line. At the same time, the dragon's blood ink dried up. Lin Li let out a long sigh and looked at the abyss mithril gold rod on his hand. It had no trace of the previous coarseness. The luster was dark and abysmal, the patterns exquisite and delicate. Under the embellishment of the 2 sparkling, pure gemstones, a mysterious yet resplendent aura was revealed. It would be an almost perfect gold rod if it was coated with deep silver. After he was done with all these, he took out the deep silver necklace from his pockets. Holding the necklace in hand, he unleashed the flaming hands again, the massive power recalled as soon as it was released. When he opened his hand again, the fine deep silver necklace had been melted into a thin piece. The whole process was tremendously fast. The release and recall of his mana was done in a flash. It was not until he had covered the gold rod with the thin piece of deep silver that he somewhat felt his palms burning. Thereupon, the mana output was slowly increased, and the flame on Lin Li's hand burned more vigorously. The deep silver adhered on the gold rod began to melt under the blazing flame. Precise control was required. Any slight mistake could turn the valuable deep silver into nothing. Even Lin Li, who had always been calm, couldn't stop fine beads of sweat from breaking out on his forehead. The melted deep silver glided over the rod. The ManhwaRecaps were like ravines. As the last ravine was filled, the previously mysterious yet gorgeous gold rod seemed to recover its original simplicity. It looked an integral whole, silently emitting a misty silver light. Lin Li placed the gold rod on the platform and finally heaved a long sigh of relief. Except for the madness before he had transmigrated, he had never been as tired as he was this day. Creating a small gold rod utilized almost all the professions he'd acquired. Weary, Lin Li's eyes fell onto the platform again, and when he saw the gold rod lying quietly there, he seemed to feel that everything was worth it. This was something sufficient to make all the magical enchanters crazy. Forged with the abyss mithril, using the dragon's blood ink to construct the ManhwaRecap, 2 gemstones from the nest of Dragon of Destruction, and not to mention the last coating of deep silver, Lin Li was not someone who could keep still. With such a deadly weapon in his hands, was there any reason not to use it? After a short rest, Lin Li opened up the ring of endless storm again. Without even looking, he grabbed a handful of magical crystals and counted them on the forging platform. There were about a dozen or so of these magical crystals, most of which were level 4 and 5, with 1 or 2 level 6 and 7 ones. I've become so poor. Lin Li scratched his head in disbelief. Fortunately, there was no one in the alchemy lab. If these words went out, he would most likely be struck by lightning. Someone who could grab a handful of magical crystals at once actually had the gall to complain that he was poor. However, this fellow quickly accepted the reality. He had miscalculated his steps and failed to transfer the magical crystals from the hunter at an earlier time. More than a dozen magical crystals lay on the table. Lin Li held the gold rod in his hand. After a slight hesitation, he removed the robe of wrath he was wearing. The robe of wrath did indeed look insignificant now. The terrific thing about the robe of wrath was that it could carry 30 scrolls and could be activated in an instant. For the ordinary mages, this was definitely a treasure they'd dream about. But to make it fall into the hands of a freak like Lin Li, whose mana was infinite, was like casting pearls before a swine. It was like giving an eunuch an erotic painting. He could see it, but there was no way he could use it. But Lin Li had always felt it to be fitting after wearing it for so long, and never thought of replacing it. Most mage robes were as such anyway, making an issue out of the scroll space. Besides, a few low-level magical crystals like these couldn't really turn over any waves, so it wouldn't hurt at all to waste them away. Lin Li tightened his grip on the gold rod with one hand and controlled with precision the mental strength he had previously imbibed. With the stimulation of the mental strength, the source of mana at the end of the gold rod began to run. A wave of mana was slowly released from the magical crystal and flowed through the complex magic circuit, at last activating the 13 magic nodes. At the instant the 13 magic nodes were activated, the pure ruby gave off a dazzling light as well. Lin Li extended the gold rod forward. It landed on a level 5 magical crystal. In an instant, a ray of light rose from it as the magical crystal was dissolved into the purest essence of magic, leaving only a glittering halo on the gold rod. It only took the twinkling of an eye from the stimulation of the mental strength to the completion of dissolution. It was indeed different compared to the gold rods that were used in the past. Lin Li's mood was lifted at once. The gold rod in his hands moved swiftly, dissolving the magical crystals into pure magic essence. After the magical crystals on the forging platform were emptied, there was a thick layer of magic essence on the gold rod. The glittering halo also seemed to have become thick and viscous. With the change of the mental strength, the mana suddenly took a 180-degree turn, bypassing the complex magic circuit and activating the 13 magic nodes surrounding the emerald. Then, Lin Li lifted his hand, and the gold rod landed on the robe of wrath. A series of runes arose instantly and there was a distorted magical wave on the robe of wrath. By the time all these subsided, Lin Li completed his first magical enchantment in Amrel. Putting the robe of wrath back on his body, Lin Li could clearly feel that he was surrounded by a powerful wave of magic resistance. Even Lin Li felt surprised at it. The power of this magic resistance was totally beyond his estimation. Usually, at least a level 15 magical crystal essence was needed in order to achieve such a powerful effect. But, on the second thought, there was nothing strange about it. The gold rod was certainly a sick item. The abyss mithril itself could strengthen magic resistance, and after being greatly enhanced by the deep silver, a low-level magic resistance attribute had been made incredibly potent by him. If the robe of wrath was worn out, it would probably make mages under level 5 utterly depressed. Lin Li meticulously put away the gold rod into the ring of endless storm and began to envision other high-level magical enchantment. A low-level magic resistance attribute could be this sick, then wouldn't the dragon's clout and flow of eternal wisdom send people to heaven? By the time Lin Li came out of the alchemy lab wearing the enchanted robe of wrath, the leaders of the various forces in the guild hall had almost all dispersed. Only a few leaders of the smaller forces still crowded around Kevin, desperately trying to pull friendship with him. Poor Kevin had been acting as an auctioneer for the whole morning and was so tired that his limbs were weak, and yet he was blocked by these leaders. This made it impossible for him to either leave or stay easily. He seemed to have found a savior when he saw Lin Li coming out from the alchemy lab. He excused himself from the leaders in a hurry and quickly fled. Felix. Kevin caught up from behind and greeted Lin Li. Lin Li was a little puzzled. Eh? How were those fellows willing to let you go? I told them, why don't I ask President Jirian out to discuss the details with them? PFT. Lin Li nearly choked on his saliva, hearing the words out of the blue. Discussing the details with Jirian? Kevin was trying to push him into the pit of fire. Oh, right. Proper business at hand. Kevin suddenly recalled halfway through the walk. The Castellan has sent someone with an invitation, inviting Uncle Jirian to a banquet. What has it got to do with me? Uncle Jirian's intention is for the two of us to go in his place. Damn. Where's he? Lin Li knew the old fellow was up to no good upon hearing what Kevin said. He was still thinking about making Lin Li the president of the guild. If not, why would he want him to attend the Castellan's banquet? News just came from the Demon Fall Valley, there's something important and they want Uncle to go over. He should almost be out of Gerosis by now. Oh? For reasons unknown, Lin Li would recall the first time he came to the Guild of Magic and the middle-aged man who felt like a poisonous snake whenever the name of the Demon Fall Valley came up. What happened there? Seems like there's a conflict with Shadow City. Time was tight, so Uncle Jirian did not tell me the details. He only told me to inform you of the banquet. Then let's go just this once. When is the banquet? Tomorrow night. There seemed to be some celebration today. The Castellan mansion was brightly lit with lights. Lin Li and Kevin got out of the carriage, and soon a servant came up to meet them. He took the invitation card from them with great respect and politely escorted them into the mansion. Outside the richly decorated banquet hall was a garden full of exotic flowers and plants. The banquet had not yet started and many guests still remained in the garden. As the two passed through it, they naturally drew curious looks from the other guests. Although Kevin was honest and low profile, he was Jirian's nephew, after all. Moreover, he was also famous for being the magic genius of Gerosis City since young. There were some sharp-eyed ones among the guests present, and both of them had barely taken a few steps when they were recognized by these people. The Guild of Magic was at the peak of its power now. Who in Gerosis City wouldn't want to claim a relationship with them? Now that Jirian's nephew had graced the event, how could the guests hold back? In the blink of an eye, Kevin was surrounded by a crowd of guests. Mage, Kevin, you don't recognize me? I'm your Uncle Rode. I came to the Guild of Magic about 10 years ago. I even carried you in my arms then. To think you've grown so tall after not having seen you for more than a decade. A chubby businessman looked at Kevin with kindness and relief. Lin Li was listening at his side and he nearly burst out laughing. How come the fatties like to claim to be uncles nowadays? Oh. So it's Uncle Rode. Long time no see indeed. Brother Kevin, why have you not visited me for so long? Kevin was politely playing along with the businessman when an affectedly sweet voice suddenly rang out from behind. He turned around in shock and saw a lady in her 30s pressing forward with her full bosom. When did I go to you before? Kevin was almost half dead from the scare at her words. The guests did not care whether he was frightened or not. They finally had a chance to befriend the Guild of Magic and were trying desperately to squeeze through the crowd just to have a word or two with Jirian's nephew. As for that someone who was hiding at a side watching the comical scene, no one really paid any attention to him. Since joining the Guild of Magic, Lin Li rarely showed his face in public. In addition, the robe of wrath he was wearing now was crumpled and old, giving people the impression of him being poor and miserable just by looking at it. Even if he entered the garden with Kevin, the guests only regarded him as Kevin's footman. It was already late to curry favor with the master now. Whoever had the time to make friends with a footman? Excuse me. The chubby uncle had only said a few words and was accidentally squeezed to a side. How was he willing to take it lying down? He hurriedly pushed Lin Li away with his physical advantage and moved up to Kevin again. Mage, Kevin, how about having a dinner with me after the banquet? Uncle Rode has a business deal to discuss with the Guild of Magic. For a moment, Kevin was swarmed. He wanted to flee, but realized he was surrounded by people front and back, without even the slightest gap. He did not dare to move as well for fear that he would touch something that he shouldn't, for example, the auntie who had addressed him as Brother Kevin. Brother Kevin. You have to invite me for a dance at the banquet later. The auntie was still pushing herself on him so hard that Kevin felt the hair on his body rise. He was utterly regretful that he had agreed to attend the banquet now. Little buddy, how about doing me a favor? Lin Li was hiding at his side, gloating at Kevin's misfortune, when someone leaned in on him unwittingly. What? Lin Li was slightly stunned. When he turned around, he saw a lanky middle-aged man in his 40s taking out a few gold coins from his pockets. A small token. Lin Li had yet to grasp the situation, but the lanky middle-aged already stuffed the gold coins into his hand. Then, he patted Lin Li's shoulders affectionately. Little buddy, you have joined the Guild of Magic at such a young age and followed Mage Kevin. Your future is definitely promising. Thank you for the kind words. Lin Li scratched his head, somewhat understanding what this fellow was trying to do. If my guess is correct, you must be Mage Kevin's assistant? He wanted to say mage apprentice, but took back his words after seeing the robe of wrath Lin Li was wearing. With the Guild of Magic's financial resources, how could Kevin's apprentice be so underdressed? Something like that. Bright future. The middle-aged man stuck his thumb up and took a letter out from his pocket. When we get to the banquet later, can I ask you to do me a favor and pass this to Mage Kevin? Tell him that my little girl admires him very much and would like to invite him for a dinner at our place another day. Ah. Lin Li took the letter, dumbfounded. The envelope turned out to be an equivocal pink with a bright red lip print on the bottom right side. Little buddy, you can rest assured. The small token earlier on was nothing much. When it's done, I'll reward you handsomely. The middle-aged man was flushed, addressing Lin Li as a little buddy ever so affectionately. The mysterious gratitude of the middle-aged man made Lin Li feel a little anxious. In his heart, he was speculating that Kevin might have run up to some romantic debt and didn't dare to tell Jirian, but now the person came looking for him. Castellan Isaac has arrived. Just as he was letting his thoughts run wild, he heard another clamor coming from outside the garden. Lin Li looked up and saw Jirian's convenient nephew walk into the garden, still followed by the two powerful attendants. As the castellan of a city, the people who wanted to claim a relationship with Isaac were no less numerous than the admirers of the Guild of Magic. A throng of guests surrounded him like stars surrounding the moon as he walked into the garden, but Isaac was not at all flustered. He wore an adequate smile on his face, greeting the guests as he walked towards the banquet hall, neglecting no one on the way. Master Castellan. The appearance of the Castellan gave Kevin a breather from the misery. Kevin finally found an excuse to flee when the guests gathered around Isaac. He saw Lin Li laughing at his discomfiture as soon as he got out of the crowd, and in that moment, Kevin lost his temper. Felix, you're too unkind. You should thank me. Lin Li took out the envelope from his pockets as he spoke. Look, if it weren't for me hiding at his side, how would I have the opportunity to receive this love letter on your behalf? Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.